After sunset, they hiked to the train yard at the edge of the city. Crouching low among the brush, an uneasy feeling crept over Teague. The last 24 hours had been a whirlwind. First, the tornado, which, on its own, would have not been a big deal. Over the years, they had seen their fair share of natural disasters. When you live outdoors, you learn how to endure whatever nature throws your way. Finding out about Cyrus and Craig, now that was awful. Thinking about them made him sad. It was hard to believe he would never hear Cyrus's deep laugh or Craig's sarcastic comments again. The world was going to be a different place without them in it. On top of it all, making everything that much worse, was the fact that they were now heading to Austin. He was sure going back there was bringing back a whole torrent of emotions and memories for Finn. Memories Finn took great pain to forget. Teague studied him in the dark. Aside from the obvious exhaustion due to lack of sleep, nothing seemed odd or out of character so far. Something his papa said years ago came to mind. You can't run away from your past. It's part of you, how you became who you are. And Brussels. It ain't going nowhere. Until you do, neither are you. Remembering the old man brought a smile to Teague's face. The long summer days at that old house on the river. Just the two of them, fishing off the back porch in the middle of the bayou, his bare feet dangling inches above the murky water. The rickety sound of the old screen door when it slammed shut. Thwack! The deafening noise of millions of frogs calling out for mates in the twilight hours. At the cabin, there were no rules. Out there, Teague wasn't a boy. He was a man. They slept in till the sun made it too hot to be indoors, and stayed outside until the mosquitoes chased them back inside for safety. On that porch, Teague had his first taste of moonshine and tobacco. Of course, Papa swore him to secrecy. Mama was never to know. Sweet and loving most of the time, Eugenie Laveau was a force to be reckoned with when she got angry. It was best not to trigger her ire. He spent hours listening to the old man's stories of adventure and struggle. Peppered with various bits of wisdom, in the eyes of young Teague, his papa was the most amazing man in the world. He wanted nothing more than to grow up to be just like Auguste Laveau. The train whistle called out, startling him from his reverie. Anxiety washed over him. This train was hauling oil tankers, some of the most dangerous cars to ride. They did their best to avoid these, clinging to the narrow, open frames, feet dangling in the open as the railroad ties passed below in plain sight, didn't lend itself to comfort or safety. Riding suicide is what they called it. A fitting name. One wrong move and a rider could fall between the cars, onto the tracks. It would make for a gruesome end. He pulled a bottle of water out of his backpack and took a long drink before handing it off to Finn. I ain't gonna lie. I sure wish this train was hauling grainers. Tankers suck. Finn glanced back at him. Can't be too choosy when you're getting a free ride. Besides, a little danger now and then spices things up. He winked. Yeah, but your version of spicing things up usually ends up where I'm pulling your ass out of some mess, replied Teague. There's a lot of yelling, confusion, chaos, and... oh yeah, blood. There's usually a fair amount of blood. Finn flashed an impish grin. What's life without a little pandemonium? Besides, just think how much I've single-handedly helped you hone your stitching skills. Teague nudged him. Couillon. The whistle blew. 10 cars passed. 15. A seemingly endless parade of filthy oil tankers slithered by like a black snake in the night. 18. It was time. Bursting out of the bushes, Teague ran up alongside the moving train. Cash and River climbed on board first. They split up. Cash on one car, River on the other. They moved aside to make room for the others. Teague was next. He grabbed hold of the rail and hoisted himself up while Zach climbed aboard the opposite car. So far, so good. He reached out to help Finn. The train jerked forward and gained speed. They clasped hands. Suddenly, the metal wheels kicked up a large rock, careening through the air like a bullet. It bounced off the side of the tank and struck Finn in the side of the head. The force of the impact caused him to swing hard to the side. Barely conscious, he lost his grip. Finn! Teague yelled. Muscles straining, he held tight. The jerking motion coupled with the weight of Finn's body conspired to pull them both onto the tracks. Zach was on his feet immediately. He stretched across the coupling between the two cars, while Cash held him steady. Below, the tracks whizzed by. River wrapped her arms around Teague's waist and held tight. Teague tried to pull back, but the train lurched, forcing Finn's body to pitch to the side, pulling his arm along with it. He howled in agony as his shoulder ripped from its socket. His arm grew numb. He held on. He was not letting go. Zack grabbed hold of Finn's belt and heaved with all his might. After much effort, they managed to pull Finn between the cars. He was safe. Leaving Finn in the care of River, Teague took a moment to survey the damage done to his shoulder. He lifted his arm. Pain shot through him like a hot knife. He took a deep breath and attempted to rotate it back into place. Intense pain exploded through his arm and shoulder. He wasn't going to be able to reset it without some assistance. "I'm going to need your help," he said to Zack. Zack nodded. "I'll lie on the frame. You're going to grab hold of my arm and put your foot against my rib, right around here." He pointed to the area below his arm. "When I say go, pull my arm towards you, steady and firm. Don't yank it, just pull steady and firm. I'll let you know when it's back in. Got it?" Zack nodded once again. Teague was grateful that Zack was the sort of man he was. He did what was necessary with no special treatment or coaxing. In moments like these, Teague always tried to put the other person at ease. This time, however, he was in too much pain to care. Holding on to the rail, he laid down and reached out to Zack, who grabbed hold of his forearm. After adjusting his grip on the railing, Teague took a deep breath and nodded. Zack's foot pressed hard against his side as he pulled. Slow, steady. Pain erupted in Teague's shoulder as the tendons stretched. Unable to hold back, he howled in agony. He lashed out. "Just pull the goddamn thing! Hard!" Pain exploded. He screamed. This was excruciating. Teague was sure the tendons in his arm would snap. Nausea watched over him as his shoulder popped back into place, with a dull thud. Zack let go. Teague lay there, waiting for the queasiness to subside, staring up at the night sky, thankful that the pain was decreasing. His shoulder throbbed, and his entire arm tingled as though it were being jabbed by thousands of tiny needles. He sat up, leaning against the back of the tank, and sighed. It was time to set his focus back on Finn. He pulled him close, having Finn rest his head across his lap. He was barely conscious. Due to the darkness, Teague was unable to see the full extent of his injury. Crimson blood gushed from the wound. Teague pulled a wrinkled and soiled bandana from his backpack. He pressed it against Finn's head. Warm blood seeped through the cloth, oozing between his fingers. He continued to apply pressure, hoping the bleeding would stop, or at least slow down. Finn's body tensed and spasmed. He was having a seizure. Teague knew this was coming. Years ago, when Finn was 13, he suffered a horrible attack. It was pure luck that he survived. Since then, any serious head injury would trigger multiple seizures. These instances didn't happen often, only a few times in the past 4 years. Teague stroked Finn's hair and whispered, "Shh, shh, shh. It's okay." He didn't know if Finn even knew he was there during these episodes. Regardless, it was the only thing he could think of doing until it passed. If nothing else, this small act helped Teague stay calm. Finn's body relaxed. The first episode was always the worst. Teague continued to apply pressure to the wound. He wanted to sleep. His shoulder throbbed. He was done with this ride. Less than 20 minutes later, another seizure hit. Once again, he held Finn close, whispering. This one would not last as long. Finn's body calmed. Teague rested his head against the tank and relaxed to the sway of the train. During the night, Finn had 2 more episodes, each one shorter than the last, yet still terrifying considering their circumstances. As dawn broke, the landscape changed. A city came into view. It was a long night for everyone. Teague needed to get onto solid ground where he could patch up Finn and give his own shoulder some much-needed care. Neither of them were in any shape to travel. His body ached with a dull pain that spread deep into his bones. Finn sat up and pulled the blood-soaked bandana away from his head. A trickle of blood streamed down his cheek. Holding the soaked cloth out in front of him, he squeezed. Crimson liquid seeped between his fingers and splattered on the gravel. Teague handed him another bandana. After folding it, he tied it around his head. The whistle blew. They were rolling through the center of town. It was time to jump. Finn went first. Teague watched as he landed on the ground, rolled once and came to an abrupt stop, shaking his head. Even in his current state, Finn could land on his feet. All of this came naturally to him. He made it look easy. It was one of the many things Teague admired about him. River nudged him. It was his turn. He tossed his back onto the ground, then jumped and landed effortlessly. He stepped aside and watched as the others landed in a relatively perfect line along the tracks. They brushed themselves off and collected their gear. To their right stood a concrete wall, covered in graffiti. To their left was an area covered in overgrown brush. They turned and disappeared behind the cover of the shrubs and trees. Hidden from view, they threw their packs down and dropped to the ground, exhausted. Teague kept a watchful eye on Finn. His body trembled when he moved, his eyes glassy and unfocused. He was pale, more so than usual. Finn sighed and laid back against his pack. Teague leaned over and wiped away the crusted blood from his hair and face. He watched as Finn's eyes rolled up into the back of his head. His body tensed, his back arched. Weary to the bone, Teague moved closer and whispered once again as Finn's body spasmed. Shh, shh, shh. It's okay.